Okay, so should be live. Hello, everybody. This is Stories Live. We are doing the June edition, which is actually the rescheduled April show. So tonight's theme is fairy tales. Um, and so everybody here has some version of a fairy tale. Um, I can't guarantee that these are fairy tales that you necessarily want to tuck yourself or your kids in with, but you know, I mean, as always, I'm sure it will be interesting and entertaining. So let's see. So, oh, yes, readers tonight. I should talk about that. So, tonight we have Richard Friesan, who I believe told me he's doing a version of Cinderella. We have Linda Armstrong, um, Thomas Keachy, who actually just got added to the roster today. So, yay. And Bowen Gillings and Travis Heermann. So, I think officially everyone who's on here tonight has actually been on here before. And I think that Travis might have been on like one of our very first broadcasts ever. Um, oh, okay. So Bowen says that his story is called The Priest, the Bride, and the Dragon. So that has got to be interesting. Okay, awesome. All right. So let's see. Just any other housekeeping I've got going on. I think, all right, well, just FYI, I am going to be taking July and August off, and then we're going to come back in September. So the next show is going to be the third week and the third Wednesday in September. So that is going to be September 21st. And the theme for that show is Creature Feature. So, if you have any creature horror stories or anything like that, definitely let me know because we do want to hear your creature feature. And for October, which will be on the 19th. That one, the theme is The Future is Dark. Um, November, we're going to do some kind of family matters theme. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to call that. And then in January on the 18th, that one is actually a prompt. So that one is it's dry January and a guy walks into a bar. So if you are interested in reading for any of those shows, just feel free to join our Facebook group, which is Stories Live on Facebook. Um, and just shoot me a private message, or you can send me an email at amystorieslive@gmail.com and I will happily set you up. It's a 20-minute reading slot, and I don't expect anyone to rehearse, a lot before they read or anything like that. If you run a little over or under 20 minutes, that's okay. We just try to keep it at about 20 minutes to, just allow all of us to get to sleep eventually. For those of us who sleep, some of us, why bother? So, yeah, without further ado, I will go ahead and bring Richard on here. Hi, Richard.
Hi,
How
how
are
you
you
doing?
doing? Oh,
I'm good. I'm good.
you're good. That's excellent. Yes. I mean, it's is it toasty and warm where you are right
It
now?
is. It is. So
Yeah. Ugh, it's hot. I do not want the heat. I think I need to move to Maine or something where it
there
just
you
never
go.
gets
But
hot.
then it'll be cold in wintertime.
That's true. So the key is move there for the summer and then, have a beach place in San Diego or something.
There you go.
I can do this. I can make this happen. I don't know
Yeah,
how I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to make it happen.
there you go.
Uh yeah, so what have you got for us tonight?
This is actually my first professional sale. It's called Dancing in the Ashes.
Oh,
And
cool.
it is, as you said, it's a Cinderella story. Interestingly, it's a science fiction Cinderella story, at least a little bit science fiction. And it's the Tattercoats version of Cinderella, which most people aren't as familiar with.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
one of the things it does is give Cinderella the agency rather than having the fairy godmother do it all for her. So
Okay. Awesome.
it's
Well,
kind of long. I don't know if I'm going to get done with it. So we'll see.
all right.
It it's available on Amazon. I can post that at the end. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
fabulous. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go. Dancing in the Ashes. On the dirty cobblestone street, Allie confronted the woman with a fur coat and gold jewelry. Pardon me, ma'am. Allie had only been there an hour, long enough to walk to town from the grove where her mother's dimensional portal dropped her. The woman glanced at Allie, motioned to the servant following. The man stepped up and hit Allie across the arm with a riding crop. He aimed a second blow at Allie's head, but she danced away. He gave chase. Allie spun out from under his next blow and slipped on a pile of manure. He kicked her in the side and then under the arm. Allie tried to crawl away from the pain, against the wall, under the mud, away. The blows ceased and Allie looked up. The man said something. She understood most of it. The implant with her mother's dictionary supplied the rest. Learn not to address your betters without permission. He walked away. Allie laid her head back down on the ground and tried to breathe. Her ribs cried out against even that. Biting her lip, she fought to regain control. Instead, she cried. A rat came over and sniffed her leg. Another joined it. Allie blinked, having never seen a rat save in a pet store. A third one sniffed her hair. Allie screamed and jumped up. Then she stood, breathing hard, as the rats vanished. People walked by. Her bruised arm and side ached. After a bit, she flexed her limbs and took a deep breath. Nothing broken, nothing clean either. Mud caked everything from her matted hair to her canvas high tops. Her shivers competed for attention with her growling stomach. It wasn't terribly cold, just wet and miserable. With few choices, Allie gritted her teeth and took a step closer to the street. She tried again. Pardon me. No one paid her the slightest heed, but she kept trying. The third man raised a mahogany walking stick. Allie ran. In an alley, she stopped and sank to the ground with a whimper. Holding her bruised ribs, she rocked herself for comfort to ward off the chill. They could understand her. At least she understood them. Her mother had studied this place for the year before she died. She'd even spent hours and hours teaching Allie the language. Allie knew enough to get by. She'd done something wrong. Getting up, Allie walked out of town, back to where she'd arrived. Not that it would help, she couldn't go back. Allie just needed to think. What was she going to do? On the way, she stopped at a stream and washed as best she could, which only made her colder. Her stomach growled again. She looked back toward the quaint medieval city and the palace beyond. At last, Allie sat down to eat the sandwich she'd packed. Even the raisins and granola bars wouldn't last long. To avoid thinking for a bit more, she fished out one of the metal cases the size of a walnut from her pocket. Opening it in the palm of her hand, she reached inside and pulled out her mother's black starlight gown. She set the nut case down. Her mother called it that because only a nut would believe that what she'd done by rearranging the dimensional strings. Allie held the dress at arm's length, dancing around the clearing. She imagined dancing with her prince. She could sell the gowns. No one here would have seen anything like them. She could sell the Swiss Army knife and the matches too, but for how much? And using them might be better than selling. She needed more information. She needed to know the language better and the culture and why they were trying to beat her. During the slow, hopeless walk back to town, Allie purged her soul. Step into a new world and people would hand you boundless feasts and deep red wine. Right. A prince would just happen by and sweep her off her feet. Stupid. Castles and banners and men fighting for her honor. Hogwash. Dared she hope for a warm fire and stew rather than bread, milk rather than water? No. The women's shelter, even the horrid foster home, where intellectual activity amounted to watching game shows, had been better than that. By the time she made it back to town, she had a plan. Well, sort of a plan. Find a way to survive while she learned the culture, then find a way to move up. Passing through the city gates, she stayed at the side, out of everyone's way. At a market, she found a corner to huddle in and study the passers-by. Most people dressed in simple, dull colors and unadorned woolens. A few, however, like the ones who'd beaten her, walked with grace and power. People made way for those. Then there were the ones between, with nice clothes, but respected, not feared. The combined stenches of rotting food, manure, and sweat ceased bothering her. The drizzle stopped. Allie's damp, dirty clothes still stuck to her skin, but she felt warmer. No one noticed her. She tried to make herself invisible to the ubiquitous flies, dogs, and rats, too. She saw a stray dog approach a heavy-set woman out shopping. The woman smiled and petted the dog. She even offered it a tidbit. Allie sat up straight. Nice to a dog, nice to a beggar? Allie gave chase, but stayed far enough back not to be seen. At last the woman arrived at a mansion and headed around back. The thought of knocking on the door, even the back door, banished Allie's chill in fear and trembling. She hurried to catch up. Dancing around the corner, she leaped over a stone bench. Gracious, the woman said as Allie knelt in front of her. She'd rehearsed her speech. Please, ma'am, I need help. The woman took in Allie's muddy clothes, torn and ragged. Well, I should say so. Is there anything you can give me? Food, clothes? I would gladly do anything you ask. Oh, child, the woman slumped. I fear you are beyond me. I am but a kitchen servant. What useful things can I tell the steward you offer? Allie paused for a translation, then opened her mouth and closed it again. She could work with computers. She could dance. Then it came to her she could sew. That could be useful here. She could sew with a machine. Allie shook her head and looked at the ground, hope dying in her heart. Nothing. Folding her arms, the woman stared hard at Allie for a moment, then shook her head. Well now, shelling peas and carrying the ash bucket should not be beyond you. A child can do so much. For such chores, I can provide a corner to sleep in, scraps from the table, and rags to wear. No more. A lady can hardly argue about so little. Allie blinked a moment as she translated the words she didn't know. Then she beamed. Oh, that would be, most welcome, ma'am. The woman's only reaction to Allie's halting speech was a wariness that crept over her eyes. Aloud, she said, and you can just stop that. I'm no ma'am. I'm Matilda. Yes, Matilda. Matilda reached behind her and took the wooden bucket from a peg. Draw water and we'll see to cleaning you. Allie cranked the bucket up and poured it into the one Matilda had given her. Then she stripped, washed off the mud and grime in the frigid water. Matilda returned with a rough, threadbare woolen dress, stockings and worn slippers, and a scarf. Allie kept her own underwear and rescued her nutcases. She shivered and shook from the cold water, so Matilda went back for a tattered shawl. Matilda shook her head, leastways as dressed as a beggar. It's time we should be working. She handed Allie a bowl. Go pick some peas from the garden. Turning to look at the garden, Allie saw dozens of varieties of plants. Nothing looked like a pea. She was useless. Matilda? Yes. Which one are the peas? Matilda blinked at her, reassessing her generosity. Where were you grown, child? Allie looked at her feet, far away. Nodding, Matilda took her on a tour of the garden. Cabbage, various beans, squash, peas, carrots, and more. She told Allie how to judge ripeness and how to pick them. Allie paid close attention, asked questions, and hoped she remembered it all. When they had enough peas, they started back for the house, and Allie stopped. Even so near the palace, odors of excrement and rot filled the air, mixing with the flowers' perfume. The garden stank more than the market, especially near the tiny wooden shack. The mansion, however, seemed elegant and well kept. Matilda, who lives here? The Lady Aristide and her 2 daughters own this property. The lady is the widow of Baron Aristide. This was the only property owned when he died, so she must needs rent it to the poor nobility and wealthier merchants who require residence near the palace. Allie translated then wanted to ask if a baroness running an inn was scandalous. She couldn't find the words in time, so she said the other needful thing. Matilda, I need to relieve myself. Allie held out the bowl. Matilda nodded, taking the peas. Be quick, we have supper to prepare. Allie went back to the little shack and found a board with a hole in it over a pit. She'd guessed right. It stank. Holding her nose, she sat down. She dreamed then of inside toilets, of running water and clean, smooth seats, but most of all, a fresh pine smell. When she'd finished, she looked around. Hey, where's the toilet paper? With the warm breeze of spring blowing through the open windows, Allie twirled into an empty room at the front of the manse. The servants laughed at her when she practiced her dance steps, but she never ceased. For the entire fall and winter, she had practiced those and her litany: running water, electric lights, and heat. Oh, blessed heat. Indoor toilets, no horse shit. Another carriage rolled up outside, distracting her. Allie peeked through the window. The new arrivals waited behind 4 others, with no stablemen or porters in sight to carry the luggage. Her chance had come. She finished cleaning the last of the winter ashes from the fireplace as quick as she could and rushed back to her little spot in the gap behind the kitchen hearth. She was ready. She'd moved all her belongings to one nutcase. The other waited empty. She splashed water in her face from the cistern by the back door and wiped off as much grime as she could. Walking back through the house, she rehearsed her speech. The porters had uniforms. They got paid. She spent her weeks learning the language. Now she just needed a chance. Brendan, the steward, stood at the center of a maelstrom. Servants asked for guidance. The Duchess Cornell and her daughter are here. What room are they in? The butcher only had 1 side of beef. We needed 3. The carriage house is full. Where are the clean sheets? I need clean sheets. To each request, Brendan gave a calm and reasoned answer. The string quartet will be here soon. Serve tea in the great hall until they arrive and the sheets are done. The Duchess and her daughter go in the violet suite. Park the carriages on the lawn in neat rows. Lamb will do and goose. The beef is for the king's guests. Just serve it all with style. Allie waited for a small break in the storm, stepping forward only when Brendan had a moment to rub his brow. Sir, excuse me, sir, but if you have a uniform, I could help carry bags. I would be good at it. Brendan turned to look. He backhanded her across the cheek. Allie cried out and fell. You're a skull. You shall remember your place, or you shall have no place in this house. He kicked her in the stomach. Allie doubled in pain, drawing her knees to her chest. Allie held still, eyes shut, until she heard his footsteps. He muttered, next she'll be wanting to go to the ball. Allie crawled over to the wall and pulled herself up. Then she stumbled back to her mat in the kitchen and her place behind the hearth. The dark little space had cobwebs and a wooden floor with dust everywhere. It smelled of mildew and rats. Allie huddled against the wall in the shadows, weeping. She just wanted to help. What a stupid girl she was. How could she think coming here would solve her problems? It all started when her father had taken her out for dinner and dancing. She never passed up a chance to dance, and it all seemed so innocent. Allie whirled in time with the music and imagined she was dancing with her prince. But when the song ended, she looked up into her father's eyes, not a prince's. Thanks, Daddy. She gave him a hug, and he kissed her cheek. The pleasure's mine, Allison. It's a joy to watch you dance. I'm so glad you came on this date with me. Allie shuddered and stepped away from him as they walked over to the table. They'd been going on dad and daughter dates since she was 4. Now, 11 years later, and a year after her mother died, it just felt wrong. She searched his face for answers, for reassurance. Smiling, he pulled her chair out. Allie willed herself to relax. There's nothing wrong. He's my father, and I love him. You are so graceful, he said. All the lessons and practicing were worth it. I want to be able to dance for my prince when I find him. Her father shook his head. Princes come in all sizes and shapes. Most don't wear crowns. The waiter brought dessert before she could answer. They spent the next few minutes absorbed in raspberry sorbet. When he started to say something, Allie rose. Let's dance. She didn't want to hear it. She wanted to be safe in his strong arms. She wanted to be his little girl. 3 nights earlier, she'd snuggled against him while watching TV. He put his arm around her and stroked her hair the way he used to touch Mom's hair. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. Allie had moved to the other end of the couch. Out on the floor, he took her hand and led her into a simple waltz. He'd improved since they started dancing together. Now he maintained his dance space. As they floated around the room, he said, I haven't enjoyed myself this much since I was dating your mother. And I did promise her when she was dying that I'd never be with a woman of less intelligence or beauty. She said I was being silly, but I meant it. It will keep her memory alive. Allie missed a step and tripped over her foot. Her father caught her. Is something wrong? She extricated herself and resumed the dance. I'm fine. I just need to use the bathroom. He looked puzzled. Okay, I'll wait at the table. We'll do the next dance. Only her years of dancing kept her knees from buckling as she walked to the women's room. Inside, she found a stall and collapsed. Allie shuddered and moaned as tears ran down her face. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. But she knew better. He'd said it himself many times. The last time was when he'd stroked her hair that way. You're smart and beautiful as your mother. Her Nobel Prize-winning mother. She'd known for weeks, but she loved him and couldn't admit it to herself. She was on a date with her own father, and she'd agreed to come. Allie reached into the toilet. When she'd recovered enough to stand, she went to wash her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. What am I going to do? She took a deep breath to clear her head. One thing at a time. First, get out of the bathroom before he came looking for her. She stepped over and pulled the door open a crack. He wasn't waiting outside. Creeping into the dim corridor, Allie peered around the corner toward the tables on the dance floor. Then she dashed out the front door and into the night. A nightmare of women's shelters, social services, and foster homes followed. Her father had sued to get her back, and the lawyers had made it seem like she'd imagined his courtship. She needed a prince to rescue her, but he hadn't come. She dreamed of him, dreamed of dancing the night away, anything to get away from the horror of her life. Then it occurred to her she could go find her prince. She knew where he lived, in that town with the smoking chimneys and the palace standing sentinel over all. She'd seen it in her mother's lab, where her mother opened the dimensional strings to look at the other universes. Her father had told her 2 other labs had managed to look between the strings. None had sent probes like her mother and her team. The rest had been easy. Sneak back home to gather things she needed, use her mother's access codes to get into her lab, and come here. The portable return units could be tracked from the lab. It only made sense if they were going to get back. Thus, she couldn't take one. Of course, that also made it hard to prove she had gone, the first human to do so. Regardless, she had no way back. With her knees pulled to her chest, Allie recited her litany over and over. Disinfectant, sterile bandages, antibiotics. That's how Matilda found her. Oh, child, tell Matilda what happened. I just asked him if I could help. Who? Brendan? Oh, child, the likes of us, we're below him. He'll not speak to me but for orders. Allie sat up. Below him? But all the little clues fell into place at last. The beating when she arrived, and how the servants treated each other. She should have seen it from the language. She rocked back and forth, swearing. I'm just a skull, but if I work very hard and learn the things you know, you might sponsor me as a kitchen servant, a downstairs maid. Matilda brightened. Yes, I might. And being a chambermaid upstairs? Oh, no, child. Skulls cannot become chambermaids. Allie hid her face against her knees. Her nutcases and her brains didn't matter. She'd been classified, pigeonholed. I'm too far from home, much too far. For asking to help, she could have lost even her lowly place. She had to get away, but getting away would cost money or her body. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Allie's mind drifted until she examined her little hideaway again. So why don't you use this closet? 'Tisn't a closet. The king's grandfather built the palace and this. They say he used to visit Lady Aristide's great aunt. Allie smiled. Some things never change. Best we finish our work. Yes, Allie said as she rolled to her knees and got up. Her stomach muscles protested, which reminded her of Brendan's kick. Then she remembered what he'd said, a ball. All these women had come for a ball. Silk and satin filled the air, sending scents of perfumes and powders winging down the hall. Light from the oil lamps danced across the tapestries and stone walls. The flames tossed in the wake of scurrying servants and frantic young ladies. Allie, wearing dirty rags, bounced and twirled down the servant stair. Unseen and unheard, she'd carried waters for baths while the ladies supped. She'd mopped the dining room while they bathed. She'd cleaned, fetched, and carried for other maids. Now, while the chambermaids dressed the women, young and old, in their finest gowns, Allie headed for the kitchen and the scraps she'd called supper. She found half-eaten crusts, day-old vegetables, and bones with tough meat still clinging to them. Food even the servants would not eat. Food fit for a skull. Thus, as the carriages whisked the ladies into the night, the servants made their weary way to kitchen for a bite before bed. Allie, quiet as a mouse, climbed the stairs again. In one room, she found a cold bath and washed herself for the first time in weeks. After drying off, she opened the first nut case, retrieving her sparse makeup and the first gown. She eschewed the heavy powders and perfumes the others used, not caring the slightest about current fashions. Her hair she left straight and simple, adorned with a white flower from the garden. She slipped into her custom-fit shoes and donned the starlight dress. As a precaution, she packed her rags into a nutcase. Allie slipped down the main stairs and out the front door. The crisp night air steeled her resolve. With luck far greater than she'd had since she arrived, she would find a prince and escape. Even with no prince and no escape, she could dance. Less than half a mile separated Lady Aristide's manor from the palace gate. On the way over, she passed several other mansions and the servants' entrance to the palace. The walk gave her time to fret about many things: taxis, bicycles, scooters, and whether they would let her in. After all, she had no invitation. Thinking about her dismal failures as a beggar and the way Brendan treated her, she decided to act like a noble, arrogant and rude. 2 guards flanked the open gate. The stone wall around the gardens stood a bare 6 foot high, serving for privacy rather than defense. Even from the outside, Allie could see the lanterns in the trees lighting the grounds like Christmas. Music echoed over the walls, drawing her close. Before the guards noticed her, Allie stopped and lifted her head high. She approached the gate like the queen herself, purposeful in step, haughty in demeanor. She still expected them to stop her and ask to see her invitation. They didn't even look at her. Inside, Allie paused a moment to collect herself and crossed the grounds to the palace. Every window blazed. A servant led her up the marble steps past 10-foot-high tapestries and paintings. The light flickered, sending shadows leaping like living things. Soot covered the ceiling. Even with all the lamps, to Allie it seemed dim. They arrived at double doors carved with resplendent knights. More servants opened these. Music and light spilled out, assaulting Allie's senses. She smiled at the figures on the hardwood floor inside. The men wore doublets and hose and soft leather boots. The women in full skirts and tight corsets teetered through sedate steps. When Allie stepped into the room, those nearest turned to look. Women standing against the wall stared. Men on the dance floor watched over their partners' shoulders. Allie's gown was not quite so full, her waist not quite so slender as the other women. On the other hand, her black dress glimmered as if from the light of 1,000 stars. Attempting to avoid the mistake she'd made when she arrived, Allie slid to one side of the door and stood to watch. She could do the dances. The dances looked easy. To check on etiquette for waiting, Allie scanned those not dancing. Then she blinked and looked again. They ranged in age from 14 to 40, with not a man evident. Allie surveyed the room again. Every man present had a dance partner. A gaggle of girls around Allie's age converged in the corner near her. 2 years and he isn't married, one in a pink dress said. Mayhap we should have brought our brothers, a blue dress said. The others laughed. A younger one spoke up. Mayhap we should chase his father, since his mother dotes so on him. I dare say our luck would be better if you but prefer bastards, said the blue dress. And looking at his son, ugly ones at that, said a girl in a rose dress. I like his looks, the young one said, pouting. It matters not what he looks like. He could have any of us for a smile. And all of us were the price sufficiently steep, added Pink Dress. They all hid their laughs and dismayed squeals behind their hands as a well-dressed man with salt and pepper hair walked by, headed toward Allie. Good evening, milady. He bowed to her. I seem to be remiss in my duties, as I do not recognize your house. Allie blinked. She expected him to ask her to dance, even if he was too old to be the prince. Her house? Oh, her name. She hadn't thought of that. No one at Lady Aristide's knew her surname, though. I am Lady Skye. Thank you, milady. He bowed again. Permit me to wish you luck this evening. With that, he walked away, writing something on a card in his hand. Luck? He knew she didn't belong. Why else would she need luck? She wanted to just slide back out the door. Then the song ended and the dancers scattered, with most of the men choosing new partners. As she wondered if any of them would choose her, Lady Aristide walked by, then stopped as she noticed Allie. I beg pardon for my failing memory, but it seems we have met. Allie shook her head and had trouble finding her voice. She fumbled a curtsy. It seems unlikely. With a tiny shrug, Lady Aristide walked away. Allie just had time to take a breath and consider flight when a man appeared at her shoulder. She tried not to be disappointed. He stood only as tall as her. His nose protruded like a beak. His hair followed no plan, and his round face tended toward fat. Still, his deep brown eyes seemed to search her soul. Would you care to dance, Lady Skye? He did not bow. Certainly, kind sir. Allie gave him a small curtsy. He smiled and led her out on the floor. As the music began, he led her in one of the sedate, dignified dances she'd seen the others do. He danced well enough, but Allie noticed the easy steps, the simplicity, and his lack of passion. Skye is a family name I am not familiar with. Did you choose your attire to accentuate your name? My
Probably
father
need
had
to
to
wind it up a little bit.
wind it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see if I get to a break here. Hold on. My father made this dress for my mother. I expect he did have our name in mind. It had not occurred to me. Your father has impeccable taste, perhaps too much so. The man raised an eyebrow, but Allie did not elaborate, so he changed the topic. Are you enjoying my ball? Allie sighed and looked around at the other dancers. I had hoped for more. He returned a crooked smile. Oh, am I so disappointing? What? No, I mean, well, not you, the dancing. For a moment, he seemed puzzled. You wish something more difficult, perhaps challenging? Yes. He inclined his head. My lady has but to ask. He swung her out to arm's length and twirled her back into a dip. As rusty as she was, he led her so well that she followed through every turn and spin and step, almost without a beat. The ball became everything Allie had ever imagined, except in her dreams, he stood taller and more handsome. Even so, the room swirled around her in time with the music. No one mattered but the man in her arms until the music stopped and she found herself standing toe to toe with him in a circle of onlookers. He gave her a genuine smile. My lady, that was delightful. All right, we can stop there. That's like, maybe not even halfway through it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you're not giving the whole thing away, so you can get that.
That's true. That's true. I will put on the comments. I think I can get in there. Well,
Okay.
I'll put it on the link to the story on Amazon so people can go get it.
Yeah, I also added it to the discussion in the event for this too, but I can also add it on the Stories Live page.
Did I give you that actual Amazon link?
I found
Maybe you
it.
found it. Oh, okay.
I was resourceful. I found it.
You are okay. There you go.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Richard, and thank you for being a good sport. I hate to cut you off. It's just,
Yeah,
Oh,
it still had a ways to go. So
yeah.
anyway,
All right. So next up, we have Linda Armstrong, and yes, Linda is my mom. But it's kind of a funny thing about this story because we were talking about this theme, and she actually said, "Oh, actually, I have this story. You know what? I'm going to send it out and see what happens." And she sent it out, and then it got accepted. So it's who knew? Anyway, I do not have that kind of luck typically. Of course, a lot of people point out I do not send things out as often as I should. But anyway, I will bring Linda on. So, hello.
Hello. Yeah, I revised this for your April show, and then when you canceled it, I like, well, there was this open call for fairy tales, so I sent it in, and they accepted it, which is nice.
Yeah,
So,
well, there you go. You're, even closer to fame and fortune than you already were. So, yeah, I don't know. I will just go ahead because I can probably just, mindlessly yak for forever and just let you read your story.
all right, I'm checking the time. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. I may end up stopping too, but it will be available on the site. When they give me the link, which should be in a few days, I'll put it in the comments. This is called A Place in the World. It's an original fairy tale. Early one morning, three brothers set off to find a place in the world. Singer, who was blind, sang a lively song. Painter, who was deaf, danced around his carved cane, and Heart of Hearts, who hadn't spoken since their father's death, led the way. Soon they came to a dense forest. It was quiet and dark. Singer was afraid of the quiet. Painter was afraid of the dark. Heart of Hearts was afraid of the unknown, but he kept walking, and the others did too. A tree branch brushed Singer's face. "A bear!" he cried. Painter couldn't hear him, and Heart of Hearts didn't speak. The woods cracked and growled, but no voice answered Singer's. His knees shook, but he held Heart of Heart's arm. When it became apparent there was no bear, Singer relaxed and pulled out his lute. He sang about his fear. He sang about the city and the sweet-voiced girl he hoped to meet. Then Painter spotted a fierce beast crouching in the brush. Frantic he pointed, but Singer couldn't see him, and Heart of Hearts, eyes down, kept walking. Painter trembled, but he kept walking too. The animals slipped away. The woods teemed with creatures, but they didn't bother the travelers because they were busy with their own lives. Painter forgot about them. He started noticing curling ferns, tiny flowers, and shafts of sunlight streaming through the trees. Heart of Hearts was not afraid, but he couldn't help his brothers. The only thing he could do was keep going. Unfortunately, though he had remained strong for Singer and Painter, he was muffled by his own determination. He did not hear Singer's song. He did not see Painter's smile. At the edge of the woods, he sat on a large rock. The sun had set, and impenetrable darkness gathered. This whole trip seemed reckless. What had he been thinking to encourage it? "Are we there?" Singer asked. Painter saw the confusion on Singer's face and looked to Heart of Hearts for an explanation. His discouraged brother buried his head in his hands. He didn't know the answer. Abruptly leaping up, he shook his fist at the starless sky. He hurled rocks toward nearby trees. Painter saw the fist. Singer heard the stones. Each took an elbow and guided him to a safe place to sleep. In the morning, after a breakfast of wild berries and spring water, the brothers resumed their journey. The track widened. Wagons passed, a few at first, and then more, all loaded with goods to sell. Singer, who heard them coming, guided his brothers to safety. He sang songs and told stories. Painter couldn't hear him, but Heart of Hearts, who could, was grateful. He started feeling better. The sun was overhead when Painter spotted the gleaming marble towers and red tile roofs of the city. Soon the three reached a fountain in the town square and splashed off dust from the road. Children gathered around them. "Where'd you get the funny clothes?" a boy asked. The others giggled. Singer was delighted. He had not heard a human voice since his father died. He pulled out his lute and sang, "On the moon, on the moon, on the mountains of the moon." Some of the children pulled back. The boy was not afraid. "Nobody lives on the moon," he said. "Not anymore," the blind brother sang. A cobbler who had stepped out of his shop to see what was going on laughed and applauded. Other tradesmen stepped into the square to listen. "Why have you come?" the boy asked. "We wanted a place in the world," Singer said. Just then horses' hooves clattered and spears clanged. The royal guard parted the crowd. "A place in the world is fine," the captain said, "but to stay here you need the king's permission." The guards escorted the brothers to the palace. Painter and Heart of Hearts trembled when they saw the king. A vulture sat beside him, and a snake curled at the foot of his dark throne. "So you want to live in our city," the king said. "What do you have to offer?" Singer swallowed hard and grasped his lute. I sing, sire. My deaf brother draws hidden fire, paints storied day, and my mute brother's heart knows the way." "You can stay," the king said, "under one condition. Rescue my daughter from the witch's castle. If you succeed, you will have your place in the world, or at least in our city. If you fail, don't come back." The royal guard led the bewildered brothers to the city gate and pointed the way. Reluctantly, they headed toward a distant mountain. Singer strummed his lute and sang, "Now we begin to prove we are men." Luckily, Painter couldn't hear him. He knew they didn't have to prove anything of the sort. Heart of Hearts knew that too. He laughed noiselessly. With every wood and stream, the witch's mountain loomed larger until they stood at its base. Painter and Heart of Hearts gazed up at the gloomy castle. After describing it to Singer, Painter voted for giving up. Heart of Hearts shook his head. He found a trail and climbed. The witch was waiting in her tower. The brothers followed, muttering spells. Flickering lamplight shone from the top of a curving stone staircase. "Ah, 3 handsome young men to keep me company," the witch said. Painter spotted a key on a golden chain around her neck. The princess was locked up. Well, the key would free her. Needing a distraction, he tapped out a dance rhythm with his cane. Singer understood and began to play. The witch laughed. "I know your thoughts. Look at me, and by your own dreams be consumed." Painter could not hear her. Singer could not see her. Heart of Hearts simply gazed back. In his gentle eyes the witch saw her reflection and inadvertently cursed herself. As Singer's music throbbed, her legs carried her into a wild, uncontrollable dance. When Painter snatched the key, she didn't even notice. The brothers locked her in the tower and started searching for the princess. Painter and Heart of Hearts had checked most of the rooms when Singer heard a cry. It came from the dungeon. He pointed the way. Painter used the key to unfasten the latch. Heart of Hearts dashed down the stairs and carried the princess to safety. On the road back to the city, Singer worried. Will the witch come after us when she gets out? I doubt it, the princess said. You made her curse herself. Besides, keeping me there was my father's idea. Why would he do that? Singer asked. An oil lamp fell and burned my face when I was little. None of the princes thought I was pretty enough. My father said anyone who could rescue me could marry me. Nobody tried. I'd given up. Then there you were. There's no woman anywhere as beautiful as you, said Heart of Hearts. Singer grabbed Painter's arm, turning his brother to face him. He spoke. Heart of Hearts spoke, he said. The four of them hugged each other for a long time. At last the princess spoke. Why didn't you speak before? Until now, my words made no difference. Please, marry me. So the three brothers and the princess returned to the city. A great celebration was held in their honor. At the party, Singer met a warm-voiced girl, and Painter met an auburn-haired beauty. The old king retired with his vulture and snake to a comfortable country estate, and Heart of Hearts, with the help of his queen, his brothers, and their wives, became the kindest rulers the kingdom had ever known. They had found their place in the world.
So they got to their place in the world,
Yes, they
and
did.
that is the end. So you made it,
Yes,
and
they did.
within the time frame.
Yes, they
So
did.
yay, that makes it extra good.
Now I know how many pages will fit.
Yes, there you go. Yes. Oh, and someone's giving you applause. Oh, yes, I think that's Kim. Not sure. All right. So, oh yeah, and Wendy. Okay, cool. So that's
Hi,
one of your
Wendy.
peoples. Okay, well, let's see. Just who do I get to pick on next? Oh, yes. Yes, Tom. Then we have Bowen. Then we have Travis. All right. Cool. All right. Thanks for reading, Mom. All right. So, hello, Tom.
Hello, I'm here to be picked on.
Nah, not actually picking on you. I was just calling on you, so that's what we called it in elementary school. But anyway, so yeah, what do you have for us tonight?
I have a story I've written, hopefully like a fairy tale,
Okay,
called The Glowing City.
the glowing city. Okay, cool. I will leave you to it.
Once there was a magical kingdom ruled by a beloved old king and his daughter, the princess. The king ruled the kingdom well, and the people were so prosperous that if you viewed the kingdom from afar, it glowed golden on the horizon like a flame in the night. This could be seen from all around, even from the high mountain peak where the immortal magician lived in seclusion. The people referred to this time as the Golden Age. A jubilee was thrown for the princess when she came of age. It was so magnificent the town shined extra golden that night. So golden, in fact, that it caught the eye of a dragon out in the desert, who then came to the kingdom to claim the radiant princess as his treasure. When the king refused, the dragon kidnapped the princess away and went back with her to his lair in the desert. The king sought the help of the immortal magician in the mountain, but the magician refused to have anything to do with dragons. These were the only beings more powerful than him. So the king immediately sent out a decree. By whatever means, whomsoever saw the princess safely return to the castle would be entitled to the highest reward he could offer. That is, to be welcomed into the royal lineage and perhaps one day become ruler of the Golden Kingdom themselves. There arose many a hero to accept the king's plea for help, but none returned from the dragon's desert lair. That is, until one day when a certain hero actually did return, princess safely in tow, having successfully kidnapped her back from the dragon. "How did you defeat the dragon, good sir?" the king asked him. "I didn't," he admitted. "I hid and watched the other heroes so I could learn how to fight the dragon. After defeating and eating many of the heroes, though, the dragon fell asleep, so I snuck in and just showed Her Majesty the way out and brought her back to the kingdom." Relieved either way, the hero was heralded by the king all throughout the land, and the princess could not help but adore him and find him very charming and handsome. He was welcomed into the royal family, and what's more, according to the princess's wishes, they were married and he became the prince. Soon after this, the king contracted a serious illness. He hurried to impart his wisdom and knowledge, but his voice could not come. His daughter, the princess, knew little of how a queen should act, her own mother having died in childbirth. The princess also feared her time in captivity had robbed her of the appropriate experience needed to lead, and she fell into depression. The prince, meanwhile, could not fathom becoming king just yet. He knew it was a job too big and too important for his abilities, and that he lacked the necessary skills. He'd only gotten lucky with the dragon. But he loved the princess, and he had earned the right due to his prior deed, so he had no choice but to face the reality that he must become the king and rule the people with her at his side. In the days leading up to the king's passing, the hero prince grew unbearably restless, nearly chewing all his fingernails off. One day, so beside himself he sought out the old magician that lived high up on the mountain. He explained his situation and asked if the immortal magician could help. "Yes," replied the magician. "While I cannot make you something you are not, I can make the thing you think you ought to be." After the king passed away, as the hero prince's first official act as the new king, he hired this immortal magician into his court, and the magician agreed, believing the dragon to have been vanquished by the hero king. The very next day, the king explained his plan to the new queen. "The magician will cast a spell which creates illusory versions of me and you, versions that are exactly what we feel we should be. The illusions will be good leaders, they'll be just and fair, and they'll do everything the kingdom needs while encouraging prosperity for the people, just like your father did." The queen, already destitute, wiped a tear from her eye. "What good does it do me to create another queen in my place? I fear not the throne, but my own lack of experience." "Time is what you seek, my queen, and this spell gives us the ability to claim it. We will learn the ideal ways of ruling from these flawless illusions. Their acts will be our lessons, and we need only learn to mimic them, who are ourselves. Once we feel ready and confident, I'll have the magician stop the spell for good." "And then," said the queen, smiling, "we'll rule the kingdom as we should, paying proper respect to my father by not ruining the golden age over which he presided." "We just need a little time," said the hero king, "to make sure we rule right." The spell was cast. On the first day of their rule, the throne room doors were opened to the public's inquiries. The real king and queen crouched nearby in a hidden room outfitted with a slit in the stone so that they could watch and hear their illusory selves conduct court. The king had to admit he was nervous at first, but once the illusory versions were introduced and he saw and heard his counterpart speaking, his mind eased. for his illusory version spoke with such confidence, such conviction, using his own voice, that he himself was very moved. It was exactly how he wanted to sound someday. The same held for the queen, for her collected and eloquent voice and manner, her movements, gesturing just so to signal for her aides to call for parchment and quill. This was how she believed a queen should behave. The real king and queen watched and committed as much of their counterparts' actions to memory as possible. They stayed vigilant in their observations for the entire week. True, when paying close attention, never mind, for the entire week. When the next week a herald arrived to deliver the kingdom's sentiment on the new rulers, the results were astounding. The new king and queen were ruling even more efficiently and were even more beloved than the previous king. Sages predicted the Golden Age would continue for years at the hands of the new sovereigns. A grand coronation was planned for the solstice. The king and queen agreed that they themselves would attend rather than their illusions, and they ordered the magician to stop the spell. Then they took in the party, listening as many citizens, from officers to beggars to bankers, sang of the valiant qualities and wonderful exploits of the king and queen. While they tried to resist at first, so ebullient was the praise that both the king and queen found themselves swelling with pride, as if the deeds really had been their own. The kingdom celebrated until the moon gave way to the morning sun. Exhausted and stuffed full of rich foods and expensive wine, the king ordered the magician to recast the spell. The illusory king and queen then appeared in the throne room, and from the secret room, through the slit, the inebriated true king laughed at how well rested and clear-eyed his illusion appeared, ready for the day's responsibilities. This is all right. I've earned this, he thought. Just for some time, just a little, before I take over for real. Yet the rapture of celebrating the success of good ruling proved formidable, and their intentions began to wane. While they still studied during the day, they would have the magician stow the illusory copies for every celebration, and for the experiences wherein their decisions would not be of large consequence, such as parties, shopping trips, hunts, or travels to foreign exotic lands. The diplomacy parts, of course, seen to by the illusory copies. This went on for some time, and all were happy. The kingdom's golden glow remained unbroken. Yes, it was jarring at times for the king and queen when their friends made references to conversations or happenings their illusions had had instead of them. And sometimes they did not remember the details as well as they should when speaking with those the illusions had interacted with. But for the most part, they got by in a combination of ruling during the easy parts and letting the magician's illusions handle the hard parts. After 3 months, the immortal magician came to the king and queen and inquired as to whether they were ready to rule full-time. "Oh, no, good conjurer, of course not," replied the king. "There's still such a large gap between what the truly good rulers are capable of and what the queen and I feel we can emulate. No, sir, it is still more time that we need to study to become these better versions of ourselves." The magician, of course, accepted this and continued performing his duties as court magician, and soon, to the real king and queen's surprise, the illusory king and queen announced that the queen was pregnant. Meanwhile, the king and queen continued to switch in and out for their illusory versions. And although they grew less confident with every blunder of theirs, every time they watched their illusory counterparts, they grew anxious and isolated, and became afraid at every small observation made by their close friends and vassals. "You seem a little less energetic today, my lady. Is something the matter? Or didn't you choose to punish that boy last week, sire? Why are you reveling with him now?" The queen detested questions of her pregnancy, for she knew only the illusory queen was pregnant, not her. Instead of learning how to rule, the king and the queen learned other skills. When work showed up at their parties, that they became proficient in deflecting attention and delaying until the illusions could take over. The moments the king and queen chose to truly test themselves with big and difficult decisions grew farther and farther apart until soon they would only dare banish the illusions for occasional celebrations, keeping the illusions engaged for days and weeks at a time. The secret room in the throne room became a torture chamber for them, as every moment they spent in that small room, they were faced with the truth that they were very far away from what they believed they should be. 6 more months passed, and the immortal magician once again inquired into whether the couple were ready. He was given the same answer. I fear we will need even more time before we are ready. And so the illusions continued and announced the birth of the next generation of royalty, an occasion that would be celebrated by the largest kingdom-wide party that has ever been seen. Upon the day of the celebration, the real king and queen could take it no longer and sought out the magician in the castle. You must do something, they sobbed. Because of you, we have become these terrible versions of ourselves and are totally unfit to lead. And now you've convinced the kingdom that we are parents when we have no children. We cannot take all this pressure. How are we to replace the illusions now? It's impossible. This is your fault. The immortal magician calmly looked between them. I told you years ago, I cannot make you something you are not. It is you yourselves who have changed you. With little other choice, the king and queen decided to address the castle kingdom from the great balcony which looked out over the celebrating city. They ordered the magician to banish their illusions and then showed themselves to their people. A resounding cheer arose. It was truly a magnificent golden kingdom, and the people were more happy than they had ever been. The kingdom glowed brighter and more golden than ever before, with the people believing they were to be introduced to the new prince and princess. In fact, it glowed so golden that it awoke the still sleeping dragon way back in his desert lair. He saw the light and immediately set off toward the kingdom to reclaim what should be his. Just as the queen made to address the people to admit the whole rules, to admit the whole ruse, a great shadow appeared over them. Everyone, including the magician, looked up and were horrified to see the dragon. The king heard the magician from behind them. Finally, you've returned, old friend. The next instant, the magician's form was crushed beneath a monstrous scaly claws. The dragon crashed into the castle, destroying half of the valiant structure. The king and queen screamed as the dragon moved his face down close to them and snarled, I've come to collect what is rightfully mine, the royal offspring of the Golden City. The real king and queen could hardly speak. Were they the versions of themselves they believed they should be? Perhaps they would know what to say or how to act. Perhaps they would even have a child to offer. But they were not these versions. They were the pitiful lesser versions, and these versions could not even so much as speak. What have you done with the Golden City? Where are the king and queen? The dragon asked. This is the kingdom, said the king, and we are that king and queen. Your jests show you for the clowns you are. I will continue my search. And then with a flap of his giant wings, the dragon soared into the air and off into the distance. The king and queen turned around and looked out into the city. What had just moments before been a pristine, glowing, beautiful city in celebration now appeared lifeless and abandoned, decrepit, falling apart, untouched, as if for years. What happened? The king closed his eyes. It was all an illusion. It must have been. Now that the magician is dead, his spells cannot go. It is all gone. But what happened to all the people in our prosperous kingdom? They were all as fake as their king and queen were. On the crumbled floor where the dragon had landed was the mangled and messed robes of the immortal magician. The queen came close, and when she saw the person tangled there, she began to weep uncontrollably. Why do you weep, my queen? The king asked her. Without words, she merely pointed at the body. The robes on the ground covered a man that looked not like the immortal magician they'd known for years, but instead, as he truly was, without any illusions disguising him. It was the previous king, the queen's father. The king knew not what to say. and could only say, if only we had used the time that he'd given us. The end. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the cue, because I never know whether I'm like awkwardly cutting people off or if it's actually like the end. So it's good to have the help. Anyway, thank you so much, Tom. Oh, and I cut Tom off. All right, well, it's okay. He's shrugging. He's fine with it. All right. So now I'm going to get Bowen up on here. Oh, yay. So lots of applause. Awesome. All righty. So Bowen, you know that I have to ask you this because I'm me. So you said the title of this is The Priest, the Bride, and the Dragon. I mean, this sounds like it could be soft porn.
No, and no.
I'm disappointed. Okay, well, whatever. What I'm sure it will be great though, but I'm like, that combination, yeah.
No, I actually went back to source material. I've actually had a copy of this on my library from probably since I was in my 20s, with the anticipation of sharing them with my daughter until I actually read them. And then I'm like, there's no way I'm sharing these with my daughter.
That's fair.
But I looked at it for structure and kind of use that to at least start this particular story. And we should be able to get it all in 20 minutes. So
Okay, sounds cool. I will let you do.
Awesome. The Priest, the Bride, and the Dragon. There once was a gentle country priest whose wife was cursed to be a poor cook. She made nothing tasty save cabbage soup, and so cabbage soup she made day in and day out for every meal. The priest, gentle and loving as he was, had not the heart to tell his wife that her soup gave him the winds something terrible. One day, Kandar, for that was the priest's name, was called on to conduct a wedding. This was not a quiet ceremony among country folk, but the marriage of the children of two proud nobles. The bride was the daughter of a great general, the groom the son of a baron. While the priest was honored to lead such an auspicious event, he worried that the effects of his wife's soup might spoil the day. The ceremony was set outdoors in a wooden glade outside of town. Logs were laid in rows and topped with cushions for the guests' comfort. A screen was set up on one side to hide the bride before her grand entrance, and a striped tent opposite, likewise for the groom. A small grassy hillock served as Kandar's pulpit. Excuse me. The priest watched as wedding guests took their seats. He smiled at each, and with each greeting he grew aware of a great wind building within him. Yet he dare not let fly, for he knew that this would be no hushed breeze among the leaves release, but more of a fluttery wet trumpet call. Such a foul sound would cause embarrassment and draw the ire of the groom's father. The Baron Brian, for that was the name of the groom's father, was renowned throughout the land for his temper. He sat not 4 strides away from the priest in a gilt chair. Behind him, his retinue of guards in shiny breastplates stood at attention. Baron Brian glowered and drummed his fingers on the chair's lion's head arm. Kandar the priest feared if things didn't run perfectly, the Baron would send him and his soup-making wife to the far north to conduct frigid tundra weddings amongst the walrus people. Next to the Baron, in an equally ornate chair, sat the doe-eyed, puffy-cheeked, ever-smiling Lady Wetternoose. She fanned herself, giggling, tittering, and cooing at birds on the wing, squirrels in the branches, and a passing butterfly, tutting when it refused to land on her finger. There now, muttered the Baron Brian, patting her knee and shifting in his seat for the dozenth time. We'll be off soon. But Lady Wetternoose's breeze-blown attentions had already shifted to a pair of leaves drifting down from above. The priest's belly gurgled, and he began to sweat with the effort of fighting back his discomfort. He thanked God when a hand waved from behind the bride's screen to signal all was indeed finally ready. Kandar grinned with teeth clenched and gestured to the wedding harpist to strike the first tone of the groom's processional. Guests quieted as his attentions turned to the tent. The groom was called Meekum, for that was his name. He emerged from his tent resplendent in fine silks and gold chains. He was well-built and handsome. With a few powerful strides, he took his spot, bowed to Baron and Lady, then faced the priest. He shuffled sideways so that his flowing hair caught the sunlight. Meekum's 2 groomsmen, called Maynham and Dald, were likewise finely dressed in forest green with crowns of ivy. Candar the priest, between stomach pangs, chuckled to himself at the sight of them, thinking they looked like a pair of cucumbers fresh picked from a village garden. With the groom and his party in place, the harpist changed his tune. A boy, not 3 years into his steps, toddled up the aisle between the rows of guests. He held out a small wooden rod wrapped in red woven cloth for the priest to use in the wedding's final hand-binding ceremony. The boy stumbled up to Candar the priest on his hillock, made a clumsy bow, then plopped down in the grass. Next, a pair of maidens appeared from behind the bridal screen, keeping their flower-laden heads bowed. They trod softly up opposite the groomsmen, then turned to the priest. Candar raised a palm, and the audience stood, all eyes on that screen. The bride entered, arrayed in ivory and silver and a crown of autumn flowers, arm looped through her father's. He was a beacon of pride, all thrusting straw jawline and thick, slick mustache, sheathed sword slapping against his ceremonial armor with each step. Candar knew Delia, for that was the bride's name, as a kind, lovely creature he had watched grow from infancy to budding womanhood. She was different from other noble maidens, having an independent spirit some found irreverent, but that Candar cherished. As father and bride arrived before him, the priest sent a silent prayer that his bowels hold fast and his voice not quaver. He began aloud, "Dearly beloved," and continued into the formalities, his voice barely audible at the back of the glade. So focused was he on the proceedings, and holding his wind, so enraptured was the audience by the pomp and circumstance and efforts to make out what the priest was saying, that no one noticed a latecomer arrive beneath a tree at the back. The new spectator reached out and tapped the shoulder of a rotund copper merchant, whose whiskers did little to hide his rolling collection of chins. "Isn't it beautiful?" hissed the newcomer in a nasal whisper. The man turned, bringing up a fat finger to shush the interloper, but the shush never got there. His breath caught, his eyes went wide, and his hand began to tremble. "I do so love weddings," said the latecomer. The merchant's lip twitched. A high-pitched whine escaped his throat. Up front, Candar the priest ended his remarks about the sanctity of marriage and started in on the vows. Meekum the groom smirked and rolled his eyes when the priest mentioned fidelity. Delia hid her emotions behind her veil. Candar cut off his words about now and forevermore as a ruckus broke out at the back of the congregation. The priest tried starting again, but stopped short. He could not believe what he was seeing. The guests were leaving. From the rear and rolling forward like a wave, the guests cried out in terror and fled with all due haste into the surrounding woods. Baron Brian grumbled at the delay, knuckles white as he gripped the chair. Lady Wetternoose clapped and giggled as if the panic were a show scheduled for her entertainment. Meekum the groom groaned, eyes skyward. He muttered to the groomsman, he muttered to the groomsman Maynham, who was his brother, "Tell me that is not the fault of someone from our side of the aisle." His brother deigned to look. All color drained from the groomsman's somewhat flabby face, and he gripped his brother's arm. "One moment." "Ouch! Hey, steady on," said Meekum the groom, jerking his arm free. "Shh!" hissed Delia's father, cheeks darkening beneath the well-oiled tips of his mustache. Eyes tight with anger, he insisted the priest carry on. But Candar the priest was no longer focused on presiding over nuptials. Before him, the glade emptied of his audience, save for the baron and the lady and their resolute retainers. "What are you doing?" snapped Delia's father at the priest. "Get on with it." "Damn right," barked the baron. Lady Wetternoose poked her consort's arm, then pointed behind them. "Brian, darling, perhaps we should take a look." She was no longer giddy and grinning, but had, like the groomsman, gone the color of young cheese. "What? Oh, fine, I'll look." Baron Brian turned, saw the wedding's late arrival coming forward, and mewed like a lost kitten. The harpist struck an off chord, then abandoned his instrument to run screaming into the hazel thicket. Meekum, the groom, chin high and nostrils flaring, turned at his father's squeak to give whoever dared interrupt a scalding piece of his mind. Upon seeing what approached, he squealed as his father had and dove inside his tent. The boy behind Candar the priest jumped up, more excited than if today had been Yuletide morning. "Dwagon!" the boy shouted, pointing the cloth-wrapped rod like a tiny sword. It was indeed a dragon that approached the wedding party. It shone with emerald scales, ebony claws, and ivory teeth. The sunlight glowed green through folded leathery wings and caught in amber slit-pupiled eyes. True, this was not a huge, castle-burning, village-destroying dragon, more of a hide under the hay wagon and startle the goats sort of dragon. Its body and arms weren't much bigger than a man's, but with the sinewy neck and swishing tail, and with only a couple of Baron Brian's shelf-browed retainers for protection, it looked a monster come to feast. The dragon averted its eyes and wrung its hands, perhaps ashamed of the disturbance, but looking even more a ravenous beast stalking fresh meat. The bridesmaids screamed and disappeared behind the bridal screen. A wimpled lady burst from the bushes behind Kandar and scooped up the stick and cloth boy, him still happily calling out, "Dwagon! Dwagon!" "My dear," blubbered Baron Brian, "we shall retire early." He rose, taking Lady Wetternoose by the elbow. "Shall we?" replied the lady, getting to her feet. "Yes, let's." The Baron wagged a finger at Kandar. "Priest!" he barked. The Baron's mouth opened and closed as if building to some heated bursting point. All that came out was, "Unacceptable." Baron Brian made a curt nod at Delia's father, the general, before scampering with his lady toward the path back to their waiting carriage. His beefy retinue wordlessly hoisted up the chairs and trotted behind. The armored father of the bride, watching the groomsmen join the groom to cower in that tent, seeing head and shoulders droop on his beautifully adorned daughter, and grasping the complete collapse of the ceremony, drew a shaky breath, turned on his heel, and walked toward the interloping monster. "Hold!" called the general with surprising strength, despite trembling that rattled his armor. The dragon whined its response. "Oh, please! I am so sorry for the disruption. I didn't mean to end the party." "Be gone, foul beast!" commanded the general. "How dare you taint this day with your presence? Flee!" He drew his sword, only it got stuck halfway out of the scabbard and took 3 tugs to jerk free. "Flee now, or feel the bite of my steel." "Now wait just a moment," said the dragon. "I mean you no harm." It spread its arms and wings in a peaceful gesture that covered half the glade in shadow. "I only popped by to convey my congratulations." The dragon pointed a black-taloned finger at Delia. "You look lovely, by the way, dear." "Leave her be," shouted the general. "My daughter will not be your meal this day. I am Duncan MacDuncan. The years may have grayed my beard, but my sword arm is still strong." Kandar the priest hadn't moved. He knew he should do something. He should call on God to deliver them from this terror. He should get the bride and bridesmaids to safety. He should rouse Meekum the groom to defend his bride's honor. What he did was stay put. The threat of his bodily wind blaring free in front of Delia and the others somehow stood paramount over the danger of being a dragon's dinner this day. "I would not make a meal of your daughter," said the dragon, waving a dismissive claw. "I'm more of a trout aficionado myself. Have you ever eaten trout sautéed in butter with tarragon cream? It's absolutely delicious. I say, did you just threaten my life?" "That's right," said Duncan, holding his ground, poking the air with his sword. "You come any closer and I'll stick this blade in you." The dragon reached out an ebony-taloned hand and stepped forward. It was a gesture that, had it been made from one friend to another, might appear comforting, even soothing. The General Duncan MacDuncan was not soothed. He cried a manly battle cry and swung his sword two-handed. The dragon recoiled from the blow, shielding itself with its wings, a motion both swift and clumsy. One wingtip caught the general in his backswing, spinning him about and sending him tumbling to the ground in a clangor of plate steel. His sword cast aside and his spurred boots tangled in the train of his daughter's dress. Delia the bride hadn't moved since arriving at the foot of Kandar's hillock. She remained stoic, back to the calamity, head slowly shaking, hands twisting the life from her bouquet. Delia grew up an only child to a widower father who talked of little around the dinner table save for the battles he'd won and how the world made more sense in his youth. Though she loved her father, she longed to see faraway places and live her own adventures. Marriage to Meekum, haughty peacock that he is, offered her that chance. Seeing through her veil, first her betrothed flee to cower in a tent, and now her father entangled at her feet, pushed Delia over the line of stoic patience. "That's it!" shouted Delia the bride. She spun, tossed down her bouquet, and ripped aside her veil. Her narrow green eyes flashed, her buttercream cheeks flushed angry red. The delicate golden braid of her hair hung askew. She strode for the dragon, getting only one miffed stride in before the anchor that was her snag father stopped her short. "Oh, will you get up?" she commanded him. She pulled and tugged at the dress that it took 5 seamstresses, 3 months, and 4 bolts of imported cloth to make, but it was held fast. "Daughter," Duncan wheezed, rocking on his back like an overturned beetle. "I tried." The dragon peeked out from behind its wings. "Oh my goodness," it said. "Did I do that? I'm so sorry, Mr. Duncan MacDuncan. Here, let me help you both." The dragon came on, claws and neck outstretched. Duncan cried a warning, sitting up and straining to free his feet from the snare of Delia's dress. His timing was off as she gave one final enraged yank, which dumped him backwards in a clanking mess, thumped his head hard on a log bench, and left him an unconscious, shiny heap on the grass. However, the move did free Delia. She hoisted up her dress, snatched her father's sword from where it lay, and made straight for the dragon. "How dare you?" she called, thrusting the sword at the creature's face. "How dare you come here? How dare you strike my father? How dare you muck up this day? Do you know how long I've waited for this day?" She stamped her slippered foot on the turf. The sword, however, held steady and true, as if fair Delia, golden hair now loose and fluttering in the afternoon breeze, knew well its use. The dragon shrunk back and apologized once more. "I am sorry," the beast said. "I didn't mean to knock him over. It's only that I wanted to congratulate you on this most memorable day, and, well, by the looks of things, the day will be memorable." The dragon took another step backward before the stomping advance of the bride and stumbled against a log bench, struggling to both explain itself and keep its balance. "I do not fear you, dragon," shouted Delia. "My dear, please," the dragon implored. "I apologize yet again. Honestly, I only came to witness the blessing of your union to, well, the man who seems to have fled into that big tent there." The dragon pointed, but Delia did not turn to look. She came on. The dragon took another step back. "You see," said the dragon, I have always loved weddings, yet so often they're held in cramped little churches or cathedrals where people get upset over so much as the sound of talons scraping on flagstones. I mean, getting into town is challenge enough for us dragons. So when I saw this glade being set for a grand event, I just had to pop by. I suppose a wiser course would have been to remain hidden throughout, but enough! Shouted Delia the bride. Her lips curled back over her teeth. "You speak with a silver tongue. I was raised on tales of your wickedness. You demand virgin sacrifices, or you'll turn our lands to ash." The dragon pressed a claw to his chest. "What? I never. Where did you hear such tripe?" "You steal wayward children," barked Delia. The dragon shook his head. "Who's spreading these lies? You hope to sway me, to see me hesitate, and then devour me." Delia shook the sword at the beast. "Why do people insist on nonsense?" said the dragon. "I am telling you that I will not, do not want to eat you." Delia the bride held true, punctuating her rage with a throaty yell and a lunging thrust to the dragon's heart that would make any fencing master proud. However, the thrust did not land. It was stopped mid-stroke by the dragon nimbly pinching the blade between clawed thumb and forefinger. The dragon spoke again, all apology and humility now gone from its voice. "Now, young lady, I realize I am not an invited guest, but this fuss! I have done nothing save apologize and explain myself. Ever since I arrived, and all I have received in response is exceptionally rude behavior." Delia grunted and twisted, but could not pull the sword free. The dragon continued, "You are the bride, for heaven's sakes. You are meant to embrace your guests and unite the day with shared joy, good wishes, and celebration. Today is yours to bathe in blessings for your union, and to that man still hiding in the tent." Delia the bride flared her nostrils and tugged once more to no avail. "And another thing," said the dragon, "stop giving weight to these horrible fabrications about the nature of dragons. There may be a few bad apples out there whose behavior is questionable, but most of us get about our day just fine without eating anybody." Delia cocked her head, as if not quite sure she was hearing what she was hearing. The dragon, taking this to mean the bride was in a more receptive mood for conversation, loosened its grip on the blade. Swift as the wind, Delia pulled her sword free and brought it down hard on the beast's outstretched hand. The dragon yipped like a wounded dog and jerked its clawed hand to its chest. "Well, I never!" it cried. Delia charged, swinging high and low. The dragon cringed and flailed and skittered aside, wanting nothing to do with the bride's angry blade. The beast toppled over the log benches and crashed to its back. Delia pounced atop her helpless foe, ready to drive the sword home, when a trumpet call stopped her. It was no hunting horn, no cavalry coronet that blared through the sun-dappled day. Kandar the priest stood transfixed atop his hillock, arms outstretched, robes playing in the breeze, tight-lipped smile contorting between horror, embarrassment, and utter relief. A lengthy, wet, windy blast trumpeted from his backside to resound through the trees. Stamina gone and the day gone to hell, he could do nothing save let fly. After a mortifying eternity, his bugling tapered to a few sputtering, whining bird calls and ended on a note not unlike a wet cloth slapping a loose drum. Delia the bride blinked, mouth gaping as she stared at the flatulent priest. She lowered her sword and stepped off her foe. The dragon rolled to its feet, glanced at Delia, then at the priest. It closed one eye and covered its nose. "Oh, I say, that's ripe." Comporting itself, the beast pecked the bride on the cheek and offered her its congratulations. "No hard feelings?" said the dragon. "None," mumbled Delia, still staring at Kandar. Waving away the priest's wind, the dragon slunk back into the trees. Bushes and brambles swayed at its passing, then were still. Delia closed her mouth and lifted an eyebrow. Kandar gave a weak "sorry" in reply. Delia cleared her throat as she walked back to her father. Duncan McDuncan was awake. He twisted and clanked and heaved and finally managed to sit up. His face was blotchy, but no more so than usual. His daughter got him to his feet. "Here we go," she said. "Can you walk?" The general nodded. "I think so. Oh, darling, did it harm you?" Delia gripped his arm. "All is well. Let's go home, shall we?" "But your wedding?" He looked over her shoulder. Delia turned to the tent, lips pursed. "No," she said. "No, father, I don't think so." She led him by the arm out of the glade, the clamorous rattle of his armor fading as they went. Candar the priest stood alone on his little hillock, bewildered, embarrassed, and thankful to be alive. The glade before him lay empty. Despite a few whimpers from the tent, the scene was much like when he arrived. Even the birds, squirrels, and butterflies were back at it, and his insides no longer rumbled. He ran a hand through his silver gray hair and looked to the sky for heavenly guidance. The only response was a round, cabbage-shaped cloud drifting eastward. Candar the priest picked up the rod and red cloth dropped by the boy, trudged down the hillock, and headed back home to his wife and her cooking. The sound of a sick duck quacked from beneath his robes as he went. The end.
Most excellent. I love it, if you can add flatulence, it makes everything better. And dragons, of course. Dragons and flatulence, naturally.
They go hand in hand.
All right. Thank you, Bowen. So next up, we have Travis. So I will go ahead and add you here. Hello.
Hello.
So what are you reading tonight?
I'm going to read chapter 2 of Tokyo Blood Magic.
Cool.
We've been going on about fairy tales and stuff, but all the ones tonight I think have been Western based, and I like to write with a lot of Eastern folklore, Japanese in particular, in my stuff. So I thought I would try something different.
Cool.
And read this book. This series. This is book one of my Shinjuku Shadows series, and it came out right before the pandemic hit. So it's from Shadow Alley Press. So
awesome. Okay.
All right. As I said, I'm starting in chapter 2. What happened in chapter 1 is that our hero, Django Wong, who is a ninja sorcerer in modern day Tokyo, has just saved basically a toddler, like a 1-year-old little girl, from a grudge spirit who was dragging the kid away to no good. And in defeating the creature, he basically leveled up. One of his power cores was filled with energy, and he leveled up. He became a more powerful wizard, which now he has to learn how to do. But then the creature would have eaten him for lunch, except that he was saved by a very large white cat who distracted the creature, the monster, at a crucial time. And this cat talks. So here we go. Chapter 2. Levering himself to all fours, Django breathed deeply and slowly to calm his racing heart and harness the rampant maho coursing through him. That's Japanese word for black magic. Heartbeats passed as he stilled the storm within. A minute. He needed to find a secluded place to meditate for an hour or so. Once he accomplished that, his celestial pool would bloom like a lotus flower, and all his pools would expand with greater capacity. His third eye had been the first, the fire of his hara the second, and now the pool that formed the magical conduit between him and the rest of the cosmos. What new secrets would this bring? What new spells and abilities would be open to him? I was certain you were a goner, the cat said, licking its nether region. Django cleared his throat and rubbed his eyes. His voice was raw. You're a cat. The closeness to death had implanted an ache in his belly that would take time to subside, even after he finished his awakening. Nothing gets past you. Why do you talk? Perhaps because I have things to say, such as, I know misplaced confidence when I see it. With a scoff, Django rose to his knees. So, are you going to finish assimilating that witch's essence, or are you going to let it cripple you? Django stared at the cat. What the hell do you know about it? You're a cat. So astute you are. The cat settled onto its haunches. That grudge spirit almost chewed your face off. The baby was still crying, its wails weakening. The cat said, so are you going to get that, or... Django hove to his feet, head swimming, vision blurry. His skull and scalp tingled and buzzed. His unsteady feet carried him to the burlap sack a dozen or so yards away. Hurriedly, he sliced open the cord and extracted the squirming contents. At his touch, the little girl, wearing a onesie that made her look like a small Totoro, a famous anime character, launched into fresh shrieks of terror. He froze, unsure of what to do. He had never held a baby before. He knew they were fragile, but not in what ways. The little girl's arms and legs flailed against him, but he cradled her as best he could and slipped her into his duster against his chest. Her skin was cold, her hair a bedraggled mess, and she coughed moisture out of her tiny lungs. It's okay, kiddo. You're safe now, he said in Japanese. We'll get you back to your mommy as soon as we can. And for the love of all the gods and Buddhas, please stop crying. Perhaps because he had little skill with either water or air maho, he couldn't charm or soothe her with magical means. So he tugged his coat tighter around her and ran for the nearest shelter, a dimly lit entrance to a nearby apartment block. You don't look too surprised to see a talking cat, the cat said, curling around his feet out of the rain. That doesn't mean I'm not prepared to kill you if you get sideways of me. How ungrateful to someone who just saved your life. Right, because cat behavior always makes logical sense. Point taken. What kind of cat are you? The cat looked at its body. Well, a white one, I suppose. We both know that normal cats don't talk. How do you know? Have you ever tried? Django scoffed and pulled his mobile phone out of his waterproof pocket. You're talking nonsense. Wait, you're speaking English. Read my lips. I'm not speaking at all. Django had been too shaken by the grudge spirit, his awareness too caught up in the unbridled maho still pulsing through him, to register little details, like how in the hell a cat could speak at all. The cat's mouth was indeed not moving. So you're a telepathic supernatural cat, Django said. Meanwhile, he speed dialed Sergeant Tokumaru's number. The baby quieted. On the second ring, the police sergeant answered. Talk to me, Django-san, he said in a deep, melodious voice. And Django happened to know the cop enjoyed the occasional karaoke binge. And like nearly everyone on the planet, he did not know Django's real name. I've got the kid, Django said. Tokumaru's breath exploded with relief. Is she okay? Should I send an ambulance? With the new power churning through his celestial pool, new abilities were poised to coalesce, whispering into his mind by unguessable spirits from beyond. But first, he had to cultivate the power of meditation. Only then would it awaken. But even though his celestial pool was not yet awakened, Django realized he could sense the child's physical state. Incipient bruises all over the body, but no broken bones. Wet, cold, and bruised, but I don't think she's hurt. She was on the verge of hypothermia, however, so he hugged her close to share warmth. She wriggled closer against him, which made him uncomfortable and soaked his t-shirt. He hadn't the slightest clue what to do with children. Meet me at Okubo Park. You get to be the hero. There would have been no chance of the police saving this child, except that Sergeant Tokumaru of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police knew to call Django when any sort of weirdness came through the 110 switchboard. A frantic mother in Shinjuku had called to report that her baby had been taken from her arms while they slept. She awoke just in time to see a bedraggled woman, leaving a trail of sodden footprints across the tatami mats, slip onto the apartment balcony with a squirming burlap sack, and then jump 30 stories to the street below. Thank you, Tokumaru said. I'm heading for a squad car now. You have done a great deed. You don't know the half of it. What's the mother's name, the family name? Why do you ask? The thing I took the kid away from said some interesting things. Explain. Tokumaru's voice suggested surprise that Django had taken the time for a chat with a monster before killing it. This is firmly in my territory. Sorry. The name? Chika Uemura. The address is Park House Shinjuku Tower. You know it? It was about a kilometer from where he stood. Seriously, luxury digs. Husband? Django asked. Single mother. No mention of a father. With that kind of rent, he'd been expecting to hear the father was an executive at Sony or some other multinational corporation. But a single mom? Was she independently wealthy? And the baby's name? Miwa. A nice name. It's kanji, translated roughly to beautiful peace, or maybe the sum of all beauty. His kanji skills still needed work. Thanks. I'll wait for you. They disconnected, by which time Django's heart had returned to normal rhythm, and the strength was returning to his limbs. His pools still jangled with discordance, like a jumble of cathedral bells that were painfully out of tune. The mind-blasting terror the grudge spirit had evoked in him was not something he would soon forget. Tonight had almost been the end. Severing a creature's connection to the cosmos was one of the most dangerous abilities any warlock possessed. It would be much handier if it were useful in combat, but it took too much time and concentration. It was said that a level 7 could kill instantly with this ability. The distance between what he could do, what he could do, and what a level 7 could do was the difference between a flashlight and the sun. Whenever a pool awakened, knowledge of how to use it streamed in from the greater cosmos, bringing with it new abilities that could serve as the foundation for further study. Using Maho was much like cooking or martial arts. A little of this, a little of that, an accretion of innate skills, an epiphany here and there. People had their favorite recipes and techniques. Like cooking, some recipes could be successfully prepared with little guesswork and prior experience. The same with martial arts. Once the concepts were grasped deep in one's bones and muscles, one could get creative. That's why it was an art. Some of those recipes, aka spells, were collected in the annals and other books of lore in the council's occult library. The baby let out a fresh bleat. He bounced her gently. Hush, Miwa-chan, you're going to be okay. She grinned spit bubbles at him. He bowed to the cat. Thank you for helping me. I owe you my life. You do indeed, the cat said, and licked its rain-bedraggled paw. So, where did you come from? Why are you here? Are you an escapee from Jianghu or some other realm? If the cat were from Jianghu, the realm of rivers and lakes, it might become Django's job to destroy it. The council frowned upon supernatural creatures in the mortal world, and by frowned upon, that meant terminated with extreme prejudice. The havoc yokai could wreak could not easily be overestimated, the grudge spirit being a perfect example. The cat continued its grooming. I've been looking for someone like you. Why? You ask many questions. Comes with the territory, like wondering how the grudge spirit had known him. Could she have been a Maho user in life, even a hunter-seeker like him, someone he knew? If so, the level of jealousy and vengefulness required to return as a grudge spirit would not have existed in someone he would easily forget. Have you any tuna back at your place? The cat said. That's not that's safe for anyone to eat. Django had a couple of raw tuna steaks in the refrigerator, but the last time he'd looked, they had grown hair. I know a 24-hour Lawson near here. How about a tuna sandwich? You know what a convenience store is? Who doesn't? And supernatural cats eat tuna sandwiches. Who doesn't? You're a strange animal. You don't know the half of it. Flashing red lights, but no siren, announced the arrival of Sergeant Tokumaru in a squad car along with a younger officer. They got out of the black and white, tugging up the collars of the rain slickers. Django had used the weight to begin the process of harnessing the uncontrolled Maho, chewing at his celestial pool like a storm against a dike, but he needed more time. Django hurried from his shelter when he saw them coming. By this time, the child had fallen asleep against him, clutching his T-shirt in her pudgy little hands. An ambulance pulled up behind the police car, lights flashing silently, considerate of the late hour. Tokumaru was a man in his 30s, a dedicated officer, a few years older than Django. "You've done a good thing, Django-san." The other cop watched him with narrowed eyes, the distrust plain on his features, then averted his gaze. Django opened his duster a crack to reveal the sleeping baby, an adorable enigma in slack-jawed slumber. Two paramedics jumped out of the ambulance, and Django gingerly handed her over. The touch of the rain woke her into a crying fit, but he was relieved to be rid of her before she really got going. Tokumaru eyed Django. "You don't look so good." "Neither do you," Django said. "Thanks for the tip. We did good." Then he turned and walked away, feeling the cop's eyes on him as he went. "Watch yourself, Django-san," Tokumaru called after him. Django kept walking. The cat fell in beside him. "You still here?" Django said. "You owe me a tuna sandwich." "Fine." He was hungry himself. The tougher the fight, the more it left him ravenous afterward, and this one had been one of the toughest ever. The cat said, "Besides, if I fail to make you pay up now, you probably won't survive much longer." Django's hand slipped into his jacket and grasped his hilt. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You have great talent, but your discipline is gone. I suspect you once had it, but you have fallen into debauchery and forgotten it." "Oh, shut up. You sound like somebody's nagging grandmother." "Grandmothers are wise. You should pay attention. Because very naughty things are coming, and you will need all your strength to face them." "Explain. What's coming? What are you talking about?" "I wish I could. If you cultivated your intuition, perhaps you would feel it as well." "I'm done being lectured by a cat." Django sped up his pace. The grudge spirit's raising essence was making him irritable. He badly needed to meditate. The pressure was growing. Soon it would become too much to control. But he couldn't just sit down and meditate on the street in the middle of Shinjuku. With a shrug, the cat said, "For someone who doesn't have 9 lives, you're surprisingly blasé about your lifespan." 9 lives, eh? What crap. The cat was right, however, about the 24-hour Lawson. A tiny little storefront on an innocuous corner, easy to miss. The cat walked right into the convenience store as if he owned the place, as tomcats were wont to do. "Irashaimase," called the clerk in the ubiquitous customer greeting. "Oh, it's Mr. Bakeneko." The clerk was a college-aged girl in pigtails, and unusual for a Japanese girl in that she was somewhat plump. The cat jumped up on the counter and shook himself vigorously, spraying water in all directions, which gave him an even more bedraggled appearance. Then submitted to a brisk rubbing from the clerk. "You know this loser?" Django asked her. "Oh, yes. He's the most audacious cat I've ever seen. He acts like he thinks he's human. That's why I call him Bakeneko-san." "Mr. Ghost Cat." The cat leaned into her petting. Django would have to check the annals on whether it was bad luck to call out a Bakeneko. Like mortal cats, Bakeneko could love you up one moment and shred you the next, both physically and spiritually. Meanwhile, he grabbed 2 tuna sandwiches, 3 steamed pork buns, and 3 cans of coffee. There would be no sleep until he'd completed awakening his celestial pool, no matter how exhausted the fight had left him. Best just to embrace it. The night was still young. The cat licked his lips at the sight of the tuna sandwiches. From the clerk, he ordered 2 hard-boiled eggs, a fish cake roll, and 2 fried tofu pieces from the bath of savory oden broth. She ladled it all into a takeout bowl for him. All of it went into a plastic bag. Outside, the rain had stopped, so they hurried the 20 minutes back to his apartment in the Takata no Baba neighborhood of Shinjuku City. The increasing pressure inside, gnawing at his pools, hastened his step into a jog. Tokyo was one contiguous metropolitan area comprising numerous smaller cities, of which Shinjuku was a western one, where the city's government bureaucracy lived. It was also home to some of the country's wealthiest corporations and tallest skyscrapers, not to mention their teeming hordes of salarymen and the women determined enough to buck the age-old good old boy system, along with all the shopping, restaurants, and izakaya, small smoky neighborhood taverns, placed to cater to them. Unlike most of Shinjuku, Takata no Baba was among the cheapest places to live in a city famous for astronomical housing costs. It was an area of narrow streets between blockish concrete buildings in gray and beige. One of the reasons Takata no Baba was so cheap was because it was home to thousands of college students from Waseda University and Gakushuin University. It was a Friday night, so the college crowd would still be in full swing. Climbing the stairs to his fourth floor Pocky box room, he heard the rhythmic thump of the Happy Cock Club half a block away. Come 6 a.m., the music would stop, the students would stagger home, and there would be silence for a couple of hours until the daytime took hold. Django's hands were trembling so unsteady that he dropped his key twice as he tried to unlock his door. Sweating profusely and finally achieving this simple task, he shoved open the mill door, which was painted in rusted aquamarine. The cat followed him inside. The apartment was cramped, even by Tokyo standards, with a kitchenette featuring a one-burner hot plate and a refrigerator of suitable size to fit a couple of ice cubes. His table was of similar stature. It wobbled precariously as the cat leaped atop it. "Bring on the victuals, my good man," the cat said. Django opened one of the sandwich packages for the cat, then sank onto the bed, feeling as if he might levitate 6 inches above it, right before he exploded like a stick of dynamite. He took several deep breaths and sank into meditation. There could be no interruption if he didn't do it now. His awareness descended into the 7 pools of Maho essence arranged from tailbone to crown up through his body, each of them like a dimensionless micro-universe composed of its attendant essence: earth, water, fire, air, voice, awareness, and the celestial. He encompassed the tumult of the grudge spirit's magical essence in a cage of discipline, bending the raw essence to his will, forcing each mote or dram of Maho to settle into its place, and as it did so, the resonance of his celestial brightened until it was as if a lock had been opened with the most satisfying click ever into a grand hall the size of the Milky Way, and his whole body and soul thrummed with it. A cosmic chorus opened up his skull and poured in harmonies of existence that connected him with everything and everyone in a bright and shining cascade that faded to awakening. Warmth suffused him like a loving hug as he opened his eyes, smiling. The cat, chin resting on his paws, opened half-lidded eyes. Jubilation such as Django could not remember having experienced before spurred him to leap out of his meditative position. "I'm starving," the cat said. "I'm pleased to see your head did not explode. Now, if only we might reduce its swelling." Django laughed. "You are one cheeky bastard. You didn't eat all the sandwiches, did you?" The cat gestured toward a half-eaten one. "Be my guest." Django polished off the remaining half of the cat's tuna sandwich while the cat groomed itself. The Oden was long since cold, but the ancient third-hand microwave fixed that problem. The cat gestured to the ofuda hanging above the front door in each window. "Expecting company?" Django scrutinized the cat again. The strips of fine white rice paper were talismans hand-brushed with arcane kanji and magical ink. These were yokai wards he had made to prevent the entry of curses and supernatural creatures, and yet this cat, who was clearly not just a cat, had strolled right in. "It's a dangerous world," he said finally. The cat continued placidly combing its fur with his tongue. "Indeed." Still too keyed up to consider sleeping, Django shed himself of most of his weapons. He never went anywhere weaponless. Ran his fingers through a shock of disheveled hair and headed for the door. It was time for this new level 3 warlock to party. "You're going to hang out here for a while?" Django said, opening the front window enough to let the cat slip out if it chose. The cat yawned. "Perhaps. Mess anything up and I'll cut your head off." "Better man than you have tried. Besides, anything I might do would alleviate the squalor." And that's the end of the chapter.
Okay, excellent. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and just bring everybody back here because it's like, let's see. Does anybody want to share about like exciting stuff coming up in like any new stories getting published or anything like that?
I've got a new. Well, it's not a new story; it's a reprint. But my story, the idol for Emiko, is out now in issue number 4 of Amazing Monster Tales. And this is like as of last week. And the theme of that issue is Into the Briny Deep.
Oh, awesome.
So,
cool.
And the cover's fabulous.
Yeah, well, I got to check that out. And you said that, you'll probably be down for Creature Feature in September
totally.
too. So
I have a story called Attack of the Cacti that I think would be perfect. So
awesome. Okay. Let's see. And I know Linda and Bowen, have both been struggling with the laryngitis and the coughing and everything. So yay. Thank you for powering through this tonight and showing up. And let's see. Yes. Power of, tea or whatever beverage it is. I mean, I don't judge. Oh yes, and Kim does confirm that that cover is fabulous, Travis. So you've got people who are excited about that. All right. Well, let's see. I went ahead and put everybody's websites so that on the Facebook page for Stories Live. So, anyone watching, who wants to find out more about all of our readers, definitely check that out. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have anything? Yes, Bo. Okay.
So the submission window is open until the end of July for the next Pikes Peak Writers Anthology. If you go to pikespeakwriters.com, you can check out what the theme is to write to. Short stories, flash fiction, and poetry, I think they're taking. But yeah, submissions are open until the end of July.
All right. Awesome. And Tom, you had something.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say thanks to you, Amy, for organizing as always. And
absolutely.
Man, Amy rocks.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Awesome to get to read with everyone. And I think you said that you're taking a break for the summer.
Yeah, just for July and August. And, just kind of use that time to go through and make sure all the videos are spiffy and have the bookmarks and,
you deserve a rest. So just enjoy it.
Do some rest too. But yeah, that's happening. And then, coming back in September and October, November, probably taking December off. And then we'll do January and so on. So yeah, just a little break. But there's also, if anyone's, worried about, entertainment, there's quite an archive. So you'll be fine if anyone's concerned. But yeah.
I do have the fifth novella in my space opera series will be out.
Oh, cool.
I don't know, next 3-4 days.
Oh, wow. So soon.
So soon. Yeah. I just got the cover back. I just have to put it all together and set it up. So, and I will put a link on the webpage. There's already a link to the first 4 there, so you can go look at that if you want. But yeah, it's anyway,
coming up.
Space opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard, you definitely, you just need to get yourself more pumped before you do your promos, it's amazing. But yeah, I'm sure it's amazing.
Well, it is amazing. Yeah.
Congratulations, Rich.
Thank you.
And also congratulations to Linda. Amy said that you had that sort of.
Yeah. It's an arts, it's mainly a group of artists, and I forget where they are. It's called the Aerogram Center. And I found that I've been using Duotrope, their calls for entry, just as a prompt to write things and get them out. And I've had a few acceptances, some of art and some of poems. So.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, I am going to, I think, let everybody, go ahead. Those of us who need to rest our voices for various reasons, finally go do that and, maybe spend time with families and all that good stuff. But I appreciate everyone showing up and, hanging out with our literary family here. It's always good to get some time with y'all. So yeah, I mean, I hope I will be in touch with everybody here like over the summer, and as far as on the channel, we'll be back in September. And Travis, you said we can do brunch soon, so I'm gonna hold you to that.
Sure.
So just so you know. All right. So let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and give our readers a break here. And yeah, I just wanted to let you know that it is actually really cool. I mean, the people who read on here, like, I try to announce it all the time on the Facebook page, but just about everybody here's, had publications and all kinds of good stuff, and continues to. So it is a good group. Definitely take an opportunity to check out the recordings. I guess that we've been doing this for 2 years now. I am losing track, but there's a lot of good stuff on there. We have something from Stephen Graham Jones. We've got a bunch of um, Shannon Lawrence on there. There's just, I know that I am blanking on some other people. Oh, Pam Houston, who wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness. She's on one of the shows. So yeah, lots of good stuff. Definitely check it out. And yeah, I will see everybody in September for Creature Feature. So have a good night. See you soon. Bye.